Welcome to HPC Now. I'm Tony Ray. I'm your host, and I work at Dell Technologies. And actually, HPC Now, this episode is brought to you by Dell Technologies. Today, we're going to air an archive interview of Jason Banfelder at Rockefeller University. Jason is a wonderful guy, and he really runs a top-class HPC cluster. And so he's going to talk a little bit about what he does, the kind of research they're doing there, and some things about the cluster that he does. Hopefully you'll get something out of it, maybe a few tips and tricks for yourself. Anyway, we'll get rolling here with it and hope you enjoy it. Now I got to submit the interview batch job into the cluster, and I'll do that right now. And okay, here we go. We have a special guest here, and it's Jason Banfelder from Rockefeller University. And Jason does all the magical things with high-performance computing at the university, supporting many, many different research projects. So welcome to HPC Now, Jason. And why don't you begin by introducing yourself and talking a little bit about Rockefeller and then what you do there.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I work at Rockefeller University, which is a biomedical research university located on the Upper East Side of Manhattan in New York City. Being a research university, we have a number of graduate students and postdoctoral fellows, but no undergraduates. We also have a small research hospital on campus that we use to facilitate our research when it involves human subjects.
You got some,
I take care of.
No, I was just gonna say, you got some pretty smart people there. Don't you have Nobel laureates there too?
Yes, we're blessed with a few, and actually just got a new one this year.
Cool. What domain is the new guy in?
So Charlie Rice, yes, yeah, Charlie Rice got his Nobel for his work in virology on hepatitis C, although he studies a number of other viruses as well. Our other laureates are, our other laureates are Rod McKinnon, who did work on the structural biology of ion channels, and Mike Young, who studied circadian rhythms in flies and calls himself a fly hacker. He's a biohacker.
All right, cool. So does the university do any work with the COVID?
Yeah, actually, we're all in with COVID. About a quarter of our labs are actively working on COVID. And I would say the community as well. We've got one lab, Bob Darnell's, that's developed a test for COVID that we're using on campus ourselves for surveillance. So we can, if we want, it's voluntary, but we can go get tested to make sure that we're safe when we're coming on campus. We've got another lab, Jean-Laurent Casanova, who's actually just published a really interesting paper on the genetics of post-severe COVID complications. So you've been probably hearing in the news that people who recover from COVID show signs of perhaps having longer-term health problems. And there's some interesting genetic components of that Jean-Laurent is looking into. Michael Nussensweig, Paul Banache, and Charlie Rice have been working on monoclonal antibodies. So basically harvesting antibodies from patients who have recovered and using them in potential treatments. That looks really, really promising. And just as one other example, which isn't exactly a lab doing research, but we have a really nice precision fabrication facility / makerspace on campus. And they were cranking out face shields to make sure that ourselves and our neighbors had had the PPE that's needed to treat patients. So it's really been an effort at all levels of the university. Yep.
Wow, that's really cool. That's great. That's really phenomenal. That's a lot of activity.
That's,
we're really great.
We're a biomedical research institution, and although we do a lot of basic science, we do a lot of applied work to improve human health as well. And this is obviously what we need to be doing at this point.
So cool. So Jason, you run the high performance computing there at the university. Is that correct?
Yeah, I take care of high performance computing, other aspects of scientific computing, and some other more infrastructure focused components as well, like data centers and campus networking.
Okay, so what kind of could you talk a little bit about your
Sure.
cluster and the kinds of things that
Yes,
are
I'd be
done on
happy
it?
to. It's I think by some standards, it's a relatively modest cluster, but we're a small institution, so it's right sized for us, and it's certainly not the only resource we have. But we have about 200 nodes, around 5,500 to 6,000 cores, several dozen GPUs of various ages and capabilities in there. We run Slurm as a batch scheduler, and yeah, it's used by about 2/3 of the labs on campus in one capacity or another.
Okay, what about your storage?
We use GDN for storage. So we have a GPFS, or I guess I'm supposed to call it spectrum scale now.
Yeah, get it right. Well, yeah, it's spectrum scale.
Like GPFS.
Everybody still calls it GPS, and you say spectrum scale. Some people look say what? They don't know what you're talking about. I think IBM's got to fix their branding.
They've changed it multiple times over the years. So this is what it was called when I came to know it and use it for that.
Right, that's cool. And you have an Infiniband network?
We run Infiniband and 10 gig side by side, as well as having a backend lights out management network that a user would never see.
Yeah. Okay. When I remember when I was there last, you had that really cool TV up there. I don't
know.
Yeah,
That's there. So I think what Tony is talking about is we a few years ago built a new data center on campus that's dedicated to scientific computing only. So it was built with high density in mind, high power, and so on. And we put in there a very nice large screen TV so that when people come to visit, we can explain what our science is about and how the cluster works. I have some pictures of that,
I think
which I can share with you later if you like.
Can you show it now?
Give me a sec to get.
I just think it's really cool, and it's just it shows you, the scope of everything that's going on there in the cluster, and I think it's a really some other institutions do this, but I just think it's really great when you see it. Did I put you on the spot?
Fine. I just don't have my. I have to get my tech ready for sharing the right screens and so on. So let me share that, and if I pop that into full screen.
Are you okay? I can see that.
Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Yep.
So that's that was our data center when it was just before it was commissioned, when the floors were nice and shiny. There's the.
How often do you have to wash the cabinets because they're white? Do they get dust?
No, actually, well, we have a nice vacuum cleaner to keep the place dust free that we do about every 6 months. I gotta say, we did the white racks because Rockefeller's colors are white and blue, so that kind of was a thing.
Oh, okay. But yeah, there you go, white and blue right there.
But I gotta say, it turned out to have a really nice side benefit in that you can really see what you're doing inside of a white rack a lot easier than a black one. So
yeah, actually, that's a good point.
So I would recommend to anyone to pay the extra, what is it, $75 or whatever to get white. For the ease of working and visibility in it. It's
so great. Wait a minute. What you got to have big logos on there, Rockefeller and stuff. Or the name? Do you have a name for the cluster?
No, we don't actually. It's just the HPC cluster.
The HPC. Oh, come on, that's boring.
Yep. We at one point were thinking about having a little naming contest on campus and so on, but that hasn't happened. And I think we're reserving that for our development group in case they want to do something on the funding and endowment side with it. So, but there's the the screen that you're talking
That's
about.
the TV there on the right.
That's the TV there, and you can see we actually put a window in the
Did you actually put those boxes there for me?
No, actually.
Those are Dell boxes.
We could take them out in post, but yeah. And there's another shot from the inside.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
No, I think it's visual stuff is always. Well, I'm a visual learner. I love this stuff, but I mean, this is really good.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So that's our
really nice layout.
Yeah, it's a relatively small in terms of footprint, but we've got 20 kW per rack, so we can
that's pretty good.
Yeah, we can build walls of GPUs if we need to.
You're going to need it.
Yeah,
you're going to need it every watt.
So yeah.
So all right, cool. Now you said you use Slurm, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I remember hearing you talk one time. You have a pretty interesting methodology on scheduling and how you do policy on it. Do you care to mention that a little bit?
Sure, I can talk about it. I'm not sure how interesting it is, but I'll share what we do. So we run Slurm. You can get a lot of mileage out of FairShare. But the one thing we don't do is put a whole lot of restrictions on things. We actually want our cluster to be used, in an academic fashion. So we have some nodes in the cluster that are owned by specific labs, but we don't really do a whole lot of technical enforcement because we want to encourage people to collaborate and so on, and not have to jump through hoops to do that. We perhaps can get away with that because we have a few hundred users from 50 labs. So, that we rely on collegial behavior, and everybody knows that if they do something to offend someone, they're probably going to run into that person on campus.
Oh, I see. Right.
So there are many knobs that we can turn and so on, but
it's peer enforced, right? The policy is peer enforced.
Yeah, peer enforced, and once in a while we have to remind someone about something, and occasionally a new user will do something that they shouldn't, but people's intentions are good.
That happens to everybody.
Yeah, that's part of learning. It does say school on the side of the building, so so that's okay.
Now, do any outside researchers use the researchers outside the university use it?
Very few. We have I think two extramural users that are affiliated users. They wouldn't necessarily be considered completely extramural. But it's really for Rockefeller researchers to use.
Okay, so are there any unusual projects you've been working on, or are there any really unusual research projects that you've been working on?
There, I guess, every research project is unusual in its own way.
Yes, right.
Everything's unique, but there are obviously certain patterns and so on. So I'll just share one that I think is kind of cool, and hope that I don't offend others that I work with.
Well, you'll find out after we publish the podcast.
But one that I find really interesting is being run by one of our faculty named Eric Jarvis, and he's actually aiming to sequence to determine the genomic sequence of essentially every bird species on the planet. That's obviously a big job. That's a very ambitious effort. But
wait a minute. Every bird?
Not every specific individual bird, but every species.
No, yeah, he's going to be very busy.
Yeah.
So no, but still, that does he have to get one species to get the genetics?
Yeah. So this is it's obviously a very ambitious multi-year effort. It's an international effort. It has some really interesting science behind it. It has some really interesting computational challenges behind it, and some really interesting just logistical challenges behind it. Like one of the things that the
logistical stuff is really pretty interesting.
Yeah, right. So for example, because we have to be safe, and especially in these times, but we knew this even beforehand. It turns out it's easier to stand up sequencing centers at partner universities around the world than it is to try and ship samples into the US.
Oh, I can
Right.
imagine.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
And
I bet.
especially in the middle of New York City, right?
Right. Yeah, right.
So there's challenges around data movement. There's challenges around uh, doing whole genome sequencing at that scale.
Yeah.
And
He's going to need a lot of storage.
he's going to need he's going to need a lot of everything.
No,
So
but
yeah.
but on the logistics part, what I'm thinking, he's got to get to all these birds.
Yeah, again, it's not like we're doing this alone, right? This is a partnership with many people and institutions across the world. But it is ambitious, or some may say audacious, but that's the kind of science that we do, and it's really cool, right?
You know, that is very
Yeah,
cool. Wow.
yeah.
So when does he expect? Does he have a target to get all these,
Oh,
like, the majority of the samples?
it's 5-10 years at least, and we're just in the beginning of it. We're just in many ways figuring out how to do it and how to scale it up to that scale.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, how's this funded?
I
You know?
believe we may have to take this out in post, but HHMI, the Howard Hughes Medical
Yep.
Institute,
Yep.
and I believe the Keck Foundation is also a funder. So yeah, these are institutions, and these are philanthropic institutions that are willing to take a risk and
So
do audacious things.
So some years ago, maybe a few years ago, I don't know if you heard about this guy got the sailboat, and they got to put a sequencer on the sailboat.
Yeah, that's Craig Ventnor.
Oh, you know about, right?
Yeah.
And they basically scooped the water through and looked at all the DNA in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
That just blew my mind. That just blew my mind. Of course, I kind of wanted to be crew there to help him out, but I didn't get a chance to do that. But,
yeah,
but
selling around the world and sequencing things sounds like great fun. But yeah, there are other projects like that. In my previous life, I worked with a researcher who was doing the same thing, perhaps a little less glamorous, but doing that in the New York City subway system, right? Just taking swabs and seeing what was present in the subway.
I could make some jokes. I'm going to avoid.
You wouldn't be the first.
Right. I mean, I can just imagine what that guy was finding. So interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The work's published, so you can.
But
go see that
some of this stuff sounds pretty far fetched, right? And it sounds kind of really almost lunatic fringe. But when you look at it, they might make some important discoveries. They might, and find like really interesting things that we had no idea about, life on the planet.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it sounds far-fetched until it isn't.
Right.
And then it becomes something that can be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes risk takers to do some of these things, right? But
yeah, but I think
you can't succeed if you don't try.
So this is a part of research that's very fascinating, and it's also, I think it's very necessary to do. Otherwise, everybody's cloistered in their, they're not breaking out and taking big risk, right?
Yep.
And I think some real fundamental discoveries are happening when the researchers take these big risks or do these really wild projects. Some of them probably don't work out, but others can, establish huge breakthroughs.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's definitely parts of science that are more evolutionary, and those are certainly important as well. But the interesting ones, your question was, what were we doing that was unusual? That would be
right.
one.
Yeah. So that definitely. So so like, speaking of evolutionary, like, where do you think HPC is going? Do you have any? You want to make a comment on that or something?
Sure. So I think, well, it's certainly becoming more ubiquitous, and I think that's true in basic research where I spend my time, but I think it's also true in other fields as well. In science, I think one of the drivers is that various subfields of science are getting their own high throughput platforms, right? I think we're Many of us are familiar now with the genomic revolution. The cost of sequencing has gone down tremendously, and that's become ubiquitous, and HPC has followed that.
Right.
Cryo-electron microscopy has made determining the structures of small and large macromolecules also much more democratized and ubiquitous. So I think, and we're seeing this across a range of disciplines. So like, for example, another thing that I'm working on now is a technology called MERFISH, which is multiplexed. It's called multiplexed FISH. FISH is, I believe, is fluorescence in situ hybridization, which is basically a way of looking inside a cell or a tissue and seeing the spatial distribution and amounts of various proteins. So, where are the various machines of life located within the cell and across tissues?
This is using fluorescence to do that?
Yeah. So FISH has been around for quite some time, and you could see, where 2 or 3 or 4 proteins were relative to each other over time. That's a very well-established procedure. It's used in clinical studies and so on. MERFISH is interesting because it's making that high throughput right now. With this new microscope that we got, we can look at the spatial distribution of 128 proteins at the same time, and that's something that even yeah.
And so, wow. So wait a minute. What is this microscope called?
Right. So the technology is called MERFISH.
Okay.
Right. Which is this multiplexed error resistant or error robust, I believe, fish. So I think that's a great example of how biology evolves and where HPC would now come in, right? When you're looking at the distribution of 4 things, you can actually look at the data, right? So you don't need HPC to do that. You look at an image on your screen, and the interpretations are in many times prima facie obvious. When you're looking at 128 proteins at the same time, it looks like a big old mess. You need you need statistical analyses to interpret the data. The data is obviously much more voluminous. The analysis and making sure that you don't confuse one with the other, right, is difficult. You can tell the difference between 4 colors. You can't tell the difference between 128 colors. So there's barcoding technology involved and so on. So that's kind of a theme that we see in many different areas of biology, is that when your particular area gets its high throughput revolution, you get to the point where you literally can't even look at all the data that you collect anymore. So you have to get the computer to crunch it for you.
Well, this is what happens when you get more resolution and granularity, right? You get more data.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I think we're seeing that a lot, and it seems to come in different subfields or different kinds of biological techniques with an increasing cadence. So
now, what is there an aspect? You said you don't use HPC for this, or you do?
Oh, we do now with the 128.
Yes,
when
with
you
all
multiplex by 128,
right.
you need it to process the original images and call where each pixel is and which protein or proteins are present in that location and so on. So that requires HPC now just to do the image processing coming off the microscope.
Yeah. Now, do they need to write the code for that, or is there standard code that you can get off the shelf?
No, that's actually one of the exciting areas too, right? Is that the code is evolving as the optical and chemistry, optical technology and chemistry evolve as well. So the code is certainly not settled. In a few years it might be, but right now just the way to process this new kind of data is an open field, and we're working on that. But there's new code on GitHub every once in a while, and multiple groups working on it, and so that's exciting, right? That's
so remember some years ago CryoEM was like that too. Remember
that? CryoEM is, I think, it's a bit more mature. There are some codes that are now well established, but there's still good competition in the field. There's good more advanced techniques for working with different
Yeah.
kinds of macromolecules. And actually, CryoEM is evolving as well. There's now some tomographic applications that are starting to evolve. So yeah, it's definitely not settled. There's active work in all these fields.
So, okay, cool. So I'm going to switch topics on you right now.
Sure.
So is Rockefeller looking at quantum computing at all? Are they doing any work on that?
So I think no, we're not doing any work on it that I'm aware of. I think it's quantum computing itself is still obviously an open research topic. I'm quite interested in it. I would recommend if people want to educate themselves a bit beyond what's in sort of the news and the pop science literature. I think it's Eileen Riffel's tutorial at supercomputing, and her book is great if you're not afraid of a little math, or maybe more than a little math. But
well, you mean like a lot more math?
Yeah, you need to be okay with, like, bracket notation and some things, but then you really get into what's possible. So Rockefeller is a biomedical research institution, so I don't think we're geared to do research in computing, right? We're more, how do we apply what is available to us for these biological applications.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So so the only way you guys would get involved in that was to be a user of the
we're not ready to buy our first. It's Eleanor Riffel who's got the good tutorial and book.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's definitely something that we're that I'm following out of personal and professional interest, but I don't think we're going to buy a quantum computer in the next couple of years. But when it becomes a little bit more democratized, I'm sure we and our faculty will be interested in that. And that's actually one of the great things about cloud computing now, is that we may not have to buy one to be able to use one, right? At some point, we may be able to get some time on.
Well, you can. It's my understanding you can take some of them for test drives on the web.
Yeah. So
but
So I think we'll dip our fingers in or our toes in the waters when the time is right. But right now we're just interested.
All right. So you gave me a great segue. All right. So what about HPC cloud computing?
Yeah. So HPC
what's your opinion?
Right. So first I'll say I assume that the question refers to commercial cloud, because the national HPC centers would say that they've been doing cloud computing for decades.
Right.
And it's nothing new. And I think
I know.
there's a validity.
No, but yes, the commercial, the big guys that are
the big commercial. So I think there are great technical opportunities out there. We do use it in some capacities. I don't really view it as a competitive scenario. It's a complementary scenario. We use the right thing for whatever it is we're trying to achieve. I would say in the research realm, the one thing that gives me some pause is just the business model, right? That our students and researchers like to be able to play and do things at will, and that can get really expensive if the postdoc spins up 10,000 nodes without really appreciating that someone's actually going to have to pay for that.
Then goes out and parties and forgets they're still up and running.
Exactly. Yeah.
After he's done with them.
We've heard that story before and so on. It's something that needs that you can really get a lot of benefit from with some careful engineering. And the question is, when is it appropriate to do the careful engineering, and when do researchers need a sandbox where they can play with things at scale but not break the bank in one day? Right. So
do you get involved in the discussions of on-premise versus cloud with the researchers?
So in some cases, in some cases I do. Our researchers are very free to do essentially whatever they want. So some of them go do what they want, and that's great. And some ask me for advice, and I give them the best advice I can.
Thank you very much, Jason. But I'll see you later.
and that's okay, right? I mean, there are many schools of thought in the world,
right.
And that's fine. That's
right.
That's what they should be doing.
Okay. No. What about security?
Yeah.
Do
So
you have, and
mhm.
HPC?
Yeah. So security is obviously important, and it always has been. Uh, we're because we're on campus only. Our HPC is not facing the public internet. We don't have the same concerns as if we were running a web server or an email server or something like that.
Right, right, right.
But of course, we do keep
That's
an eye
true.
on
That's true
things.
of a
And
lot of, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's true
absolutely.
of a lot of HPC installations, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. We know who all our users are. They're all members of our community, so that makes things a little bit easier. The one thing
yeah,
that we do have to balance is the idea that the normal the normal security posture is make sure that everything is kept up to date. Patch your Windows machine, patch your Mac, and so on. In HPC, we have to balance that with the notion of it's really important in science that results are reproducible, right? So we can't just randomly
yep,
upgrade the codes that people are running in the middle of a study because what you computed last month and today needs to be comparable. And in many cases, doing updates will change the answer that you get. So we just have to think about that and make sure that we're doing the right balance. So if there are specific security things we need to address, we absolutely do. But we don't really just blindly patch every bit of code that we have because there's a new version out. And we often retain old
yeah. Okay,
versions to make sure that results are reproducible.
right, right. Yeah, that's pretty good, and that includes the data too, right? You have to be
Yeah.
very careful about the data and how you store it.
Yes. Yeah. So our one of the nice things about working at Rockefeller is that we are primarily a basic science institution. We do work with patient data. We actually do have a small hospital on campus. But
That's right. I remember you
yeah,
telling us about that. Yeah.
yeah. But we don't necessarily have to make the entire university's posture focus around that. Whereas if you're working at a major metropolitan medical center, clinical work comes first. In Rockefeller, it's
Yeah.
a bit
Now,
inverted. Mhm.
so do you have to manage protected health information in your on the cluster?
Mhm. Yeah, so actually we discourage use of it on the cluster because we don't want to burden all the other researchers with that. So yes, we do manage it, and I
Yeah.
think that
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
right word. Is when we work with protected data, it absolutely has to be managed. We don't take the
Yes.
approach that
Right.
there's a green zone, and once you're in the green zone, everything is safe and you don't have to worry about it, right? So
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
do what we need to do to manage the protected data and be vigilant
Yeah.
about it.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or mention about
Uh,
Rockefeller yourself?
yeah, I think the one thing that I would leave us with is this idea that as HPC becomes more ubiquitous and more democratized, one of the key elements is education. When we train up our next generation of scientists and researchers, I think we're finding that we need to make sure that they have a strong background in computing, in scientific computing in general, also in the appropriate mathematical and statistical techniques that go along with analyzing large data sets where, as we said before, you're just never going to be able to look at all the data you collect, all the raw data that you collect once you get onto these high throughput
Yeah.
platforms. So whereas
That's a pretty good point.
yeah. So I think in the I would say the classical days, but this is certainly still true, is you have certain people when they're doing their physical experiments and working at the bench, we say they have magic hands and they can just get things done, because they have a real feel for how these biological systems work and how to manipulate them. And I think there's another class of people that's coming up that have magic fingers on the keyboard. And can
Yeah.
analyze these scads of data and do the right analytics and produce the right visualizations and so on, and you can make a great career out of that in scientific computing. And I think the demand for that is going to be ever greater. And as being part of an
Right.
educational institution,
Well, things aren't going to get simpler.
things will
Right?
not get
Things
simpler.
aren't going to get simpler. They're going to get more. They're
Yeah.
going to get more complex.
Yeah, and these
Right.
are no longer esoteric, specialized things that only a few people do. It's just going to become more and more ubiquitous, and we're going to need more and more people who want to do this and like to do this and are good at it. And as being part of an educational institution, I see it as part of our mission to help make those people and give them the opportunities to learn what it is that they need to learn to do this.
I think that's very well said. That is right on the money. I agree with you. That and by the way, it just helps them having the skills. It allows them to be more productive and do better research.
Absolutely, yeah,
So,
and ultimately that's
yeah.
Better for us as human beings needing medical care, and better for our environment, and better for the world.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, Jason, thank you very much for your time today, and really appreciate you being on HPC Now. Anyway, again, thanks for the interview. You did a great job here. Really fascinating stuff over there at Rockefeller and yourself. So thank you very much. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Tony. You too, stay safe, and it's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Well, that was our interview with Jason Banfelder at Rockefeller University. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe you got something out of it. So that concludes our episode of HPC Now today. Myself, Tony Ray, I wish you well, and we'll be putting up another broadcast soon of HPC Now, sponsored by Dell Technologies. So we're going to sign off. Be well, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you soon.